with us that at that point she needed a few more hours. And she told David that he could pick her up the next morning and take her to this treatment center, but she needed a few more hours. She went back upstairs to a group of people who pretty much said the opposite of what we were saying. They said that we weren't her friends, they were her friends. If she did in fact have problems, they'd be the ones to help her solve those problems. She's, I think, confused and conflicted, and there's more drugs, there's more alcohol. They stay up all night, and finally around sunrise, she's the last one awake. And she ends up taking a razor blade off the kitchen counter and goes in the bathroom. And with this blade across her left forearm, she writes the word "fuck up." And I know Noah already said that word, so it's less shocking. But I go to a lot of places to tell this story. I've told this story in high schools in Australia. I've told it in pubs in England. I've told it in churches here in America. And so as you can imagine, I go some places where people don't really say that word. And I also go to some places where I'm asked not to say that word. And I get that. I totally respect that and understand that policy. The reason that I go there tonight, the reason it shows up in the story that all of this grew out of, is because I think if you had the chance to meet my friend Renee and to talk to her about that night and that word and that moment and why, what did that mean? What was that about? I don't think you would have a conversation about profanity. I think instead that you would have a conversation about identity. And I think you would hear her say that in that moment, hey, I've been on this planet 19 years and there's not much to be proud of. There's not much to show for it. This is how stuck I am. This is what a failure I am. This is how much regret I live with. And I think in a way that was just her saying, hey, this is me. She walked into this treatment center the next morning wearing a hoodie, so her arms were obviously covered, and it was pretty quickly that the nurse asked her to take off this hoodie. And when Renee did that, they found this wound that was not only fresh, but it was self-inflicted. It was the combination of this wound and the drugs that were still in her system, and because of that combination, they actually denied her entry into treatment. And as a side note, it's worth saying that wouldn't normally be the case. This particular treatment center, they were small, they weren't insured, they weren't insured for an element of detox. And so because of that, they had to tell her that, hey, if you can stay clean and sober and not hurt yourself for 5 days, you'll be welcome back at that time. And for the next 5 days, she lived in our living room. And these were her first days sober, her first days coming down, her first days kind of coming back to life in a long time. And we stayed up late 5 nights in a row just getting to know this girl, getting to know her story. And parts of her story were really painful. She talked about things that happened to her even as a little girl and ways that she tried to cope and to respond. And ways it didn't work. And ways some of that coping and running just led to more pain, led to abuse and depression and addiction. And so we talked about some hard stuff, and then we talked about some good stuff as well. We talked about these words, we kind of wrestled with these words like sobriety and healing and starting over. And I think what she was asking is are these things real? Like, are these words possible? Are they better than cute? Like, can I hold on to them? Renee loved music. She talked about how music was very much a source of hope and encouragement for her, especially when things were difficult. And because of that, 2 of the 5 nights, we actually took her to concerts just so that she could be in the room with music. And somewhere in the middle of our time together, I just asked her this really vulnerable question. And I expected the answer to be no, maybe even no way, get lost. And the question was, what do you think about the possibility of telling your story? And I wasn't a writer, certainly wasn't a well-known writer. I was a college dropout and sales rep. And I think first off, where I was starting was I'd never had conversations like this. I'd never had an encounter like this, and I just wanted to not lose it, not forget it, not go back to normal. And like I said, I would have totally understood if she just said, hey, I'm sorry, no, that's private, that's my stuff. And instead, she kind of lit up and smiled and said she loved the possibility that maybe there could be a purpose for her pain. That maybe there could be someone out there who relates to what she has lived through, and maybe there could even be someone who finds hope in this story being told. And if any of that could happen, even for one other person, that maybe that's reason enough to go there. And so we kind of sat back and smiled and said, okay, we don't have a plan, we've never done this before, but we're going to tell this story. And as we kept talking, we ran into what felt like this roadblock, which was that the story has to start somewhere, and the story has to end somewhere, and we can probably find a place to start, but we don't have an ending yet, and we certainly don't have the ending that we're hoping for. And then as we kept talking, we came to this other place, like, we came to this other idea that maybe we could just be honest, because maybe a story that was still in the middle of itself, a story that had a lot of pain and a lot of questions and a lot that was up in the air, maybe that was actually one that people could relate to. And that felt true 5.5 years ago, and I don't know how it is for you, but for me that still feels true, and I think for my friend Renee, that's still the case. So then we just decided we would be honest about her life, and what she had lived through, and some of the pain of that, and in the face of it, the hope that we had that life could maybe change. And after 5 days, she checked into treatment, and I sat down and started writing and wrote a couple pages, and it came quickly. And I kept going back to this phrase that I had used in the story, and kept thinking this phrase should maybe be the title. But it was weird, it was long, it was like a Fall Out Boy song title. And it was this phrase, to write love on her arms. And really what that was, it was a goal. And it was a goal that went back to this word that my friend had marked across her body. And the idea that if that was about identity, then this goal was also about identity. It was about believing that a better life was possible for her, and that she deserved this better life. And I sent the story to some friends and family, and was really encouraged and surprised by the response. Just people saying they were moved by it. People saying it made them think, it made them cry. And then we realized that, you know what, Renee's treatment is going to cost money, and her family doesn't have much money. She doesn't have any money, so there was this really simple financial need that was surfacing. And I don't know how inspiration happens for you. I don't know what it looks like, where it comes from, but for me, this was March 2006. At this point, I found myself at a Coldplay concert. I'll be enough. Extraordinary.